Oh hell, Internet! Just up front, this morning I had a weird and slightly tense interaction at work where I had to be frank about my opinions and try and be sensitive at the same time. It kind of went okay, and this is not where I'm going to start, but it'll come up again later, and there was a direct line from that event to this video coming out, just to show you how my mind works sometimes. Now, pardon me for simplifying massively, because that's not like me at all, but is the fundamental economic difference between the left and the right about the relative importance of hard work, whatever that concept might mean to you, because that's what I'm going to think about in this video. Actually, on one level, hard work is pretty easy to unpack. It is work, which we could call effort towards a goal, and it is hard, sustained, maybe physically or mentally taxing. But what will actually constitute hard work for each individual will be different, and society does seem to be broadly okay with that. Culture wars aside, you can choose what you want to work on, but generally the assumption is still that you should work hard at something. But that itself is an assumption of sorts. Must we all work hard? It seems to me the concept of civilization is not predicated on everyone becoming a type A personality, but that seems to be what industrialized culture would have us believe. There was a recent interview with an anti-work advocate in the news on a right-wing channel, and they did not come off looking too well. It was a hostile interview, but they were unprepared, awkward, and generally did not represent their position clearly, despite obvious good intentions. I do not claim to be any better equipped, frankly, but let me put it like this. A pre-civilization hunter-gatherer human had far more free time than we do today, because if you're not driven towards some larger goal, then you require only a basic surplus of resources to make you happy. This option has been snuffed out in the modern work culture. If you're born into the modern state, it is functionally impossible to opt out and be a hunter-gatherer working 20 to 30 hours a week, and almost no country offers a decent living at that level of productivity. The intention is to make you work as much as possible for the smallest possible incentive. Those of a libertarian bent will say this is how things work as economies develop, and it's really just a direct line from Lockean industry to the modern capitalist theories of desert. Here's the twist though. I agree with the essential Lockean concept that some people are more goal-driven than others. Modern psychology does identify type A personalities, although there's no doubt much more nuance than that, and I am generalizing again. But that does not permit the right to force everyone else into that mindset too, because that is what corporate oligarchy is doing, driving everyone to live in the same type A misery, because misery loves company. Before anyone accuses me of being some dropout who just wants a free ride, well, just look at that, shall we? I would say it is true that I am not the most industrious person. I will work to live rather than vice versa. After graduating university, the last year in the UK to not pay fees, I was unsure of myself in the world and spent several years in basic low-skill jobs, fighting periodic bouts of depression and putting off any long-term goals because I can't do that sort of thing, I'll just mess it up. Today, I've been running my own business for the last 4 years, and there is one and only one reason why that is the case. It's because my aunt left me a third of a London terrace house in her will. I still had to work, so it would be easy to say that this was not a life-changing amount of money, except it was manifestly a life-changing amount of money. Some of the inheritance went to some poor decisions or procrastination, but even that gave me time to develop into an adult and deal with the existential situation I saw myself in. Some went to self-improvement or therapy during darker times, and I made further use of my good fortune being an English speaker to pursue a career teaching English in Asia, which makes it easier to make a basic modern living. And now I do private tutoring. And libertarians, there is no way any of that happens if I don't have the ability to say, okay, I can just try this, and if it doesn't go well, I'm not on the street. And libertarians, what do we call that? What's the word? You know the word, right? I know you know the word. I know you hate the word though, so I won't say the word. But libertarians, Most people don't have that, not even close. And in the modern world, they can't even just say, let me do my 20 to 30 hours of hunting and gathering per week while I figure it out. How is that so freaking hard to understand? Or what is your simple own the libs response? That's just my anecdotal story with me as the protagonist, but the studies on UBI have been generally quite positive, although small scale and not conclusive at this point. But people do tend to become happier and more productive versions of themselves if they're not constantly put in a position of concern for their personal safety and security. I'm glossing over an entire topic now, but broad strokes, people. Side note, I only met her in the years later, but I also want to say there's no way any of this happens without my wonderful wife, who I love and I'm so lucky to have, and who has helped me to be a better version of myself in all of those sappy rom-com ways. I'm trying to keep it simple, but I had to be clear on that. Well, sure, you might say. That is all wonderfully idealistic, but the basic fact on the ground is that the world has to proceed somehow. And if it's going to proceed, it's going to be shaped. And if it's going to be shaped at all, then it should be shaped by those who demonstrate a level of tenacity and fortitude to be able to prevail in the face of inevitable setbacks that, let's put it simply, are the world. Let's just look at that, shall we? Should be? Really? That's a value judgment. And why are tenacity and fortitude qualifying? I'm not saying that they're disqualifying, but I notice that tenacity and fortitude does not automatically come along with compassion and empathy. Do we really not want those? It has been said that success, achievement of goals, can depend on one's ability to have difficult conversations. And this is where my earlier professional interaction comes in. As I said, I was put in a situation where I needed to say quite firmly, this doesn't work for me, and I need to say it now. After the meeting in question, I was nearly paralyzed by indecision and self-doubt over how I handled the interaction, if I spoke appropriately, what I could have said instead. It's possible, I will never know, that my words had a real impact on the other person in a positive or a negative way, but I have no control over how that proceeds in their heads. 5 years ago, I would have spiraled into a daze for the rest of the day, or worse, but I've picked up a mantra now, and I was able to bring it under control somewhat. That is how I have come to continue against the voice that says all goals are pointless. If you are driven by goals, then you are going to have these kinds of uncomfortable interactions with others and with yourself. And it may be a cold truth that those who are better able to put aside that indecision are more likely to pursue a goal further. Now, at this point, you might think I'm heading for the obvious and often claimed conclusion that billionaires are sociopaths here. No, not really. I mean, I'm sure that some are. Maybe it even helps. But I think most people who achieve material success, especially disproportionate to their socioeconomic background, will all have, at some time, been forced to not avoid conflict. That doesn't mean they wanted the conflict. It doesn't mean they felt no care for causing the conflict. But once you're in a conflict, then, to a commensurate degree, the law of the jungle applies. Not literally, of course, but your fragile human physiology and psychology will feed a survival tendency. Anything you do now is by definition justified, and you can justify it to yourself later. And afterwards, they will have done exactly that. Justified it to themselves, with themselves as the protagonist, no matter what the larger population might have to say about their conduct. And if they don't hate themselves, they will have given themselves the most charitable interpretation they can. And why not? I don't think it's a stretch to say that protagonist syndrome is a rightful part of the human condition, to some extent. But the decisions of driven people will create ripples in the world. We cannot avoid that consequence. On the other hand, though, that in turn does not make their drivenness right. Okay, so it is a plausible extension of this line that I'm following to say that the people who are the least encumbered by moral scruples will be the most successful here. But there do seem to be some kind of social defense mechanisms built against this to stop people falling too far too fast, although they don't seem to be perfect. Look, far be it from me to tell anyone how to live, but he doesn't care about you. He isn't fighting for you. He only cares about himself. He only ever has and only ever will. But of course, There are plenty of billionaires in the world who do actually have a genuine moral framework, and I imagine many billionaires experience some kind of shame and regret. We do know they experience mental health issues just like the rest of the population. As the saying goes, money doesn't buy you happiness, but it does get a better class of misery. But they are the protagonist. And what do we do with shame and regret, ladies and gentlemen? We hide it and we refuse to acknowledge it, or we embrace it and we attach to it, or we deal with it and we grow from it. I suppose it is possible that all of the people who are super wealthy in the world are those who have actually overcome their traumas and made something out of their lives despite it. Because yes, that's right, only billionaires actually have life-affirming stories of personal growth, right? What do you think? Like all traumas, the trauma of billionaires is different for every person. Maybe it was some confrontation to their ethical code and years later they still don't know if they made the right choice. Maybe it was deep dissatisfaction with your relationship with parents, an old classic. Maybe it's the knowledge that they've created something that's changed the world in an unimaginable way, whether it be good or bad. Maybe it's the sneaking suspicion that what they do isn't actually worth what they have. Maybe it all stems from some Rubicon crossing moment, or maybe it comes from a lifetime of seemingly petty decisions. Who knows? Not me. Who cares? Well, me, obviously, that's why I'm talking about it. What can or should be done about it? Well, don't get me started, but here's a more interesting question. What is the inner life of the people who started the 2008 financial crash like today? What are they feeling about their part in that event? Those who experience no guilt at all, well, they are sociopaths, right? I mean, can we agree on that? But if there is any sense of what they did and the scale of its repercussions and who it affected, then what must that be like? They must have experienced some kind of psychological effect and also built some kind of psychological defense to that. Now, just to be quite clear, I am in no way leading to say that the scale of the decisions means that the trauma of billionaires is greater in some way. That is a hypothesis that one could make. However, I think even if you do have to wrestle with making decisions that might kill thousands, that maybe a victim of child rape might be able to rival you in the trauma front. I'm just guessing though, I have not done that study. The trauma of billionaires might not be lesser though, but they can prosper through it. And what do we call that, folks? We call it Oh, come on, just once? For fuck's sake. To finish off though, the billionaire who people do seem to appreciate is the one that realizes and shows that material control is not the thing that satisfies. Bill Gates was controversial until he gave up Microsoft and much of his wealth. Then he was extremely popular for a while, until it began to look like his charitable foundation was maybe just another kind of financial and political mechanism, because he just couldn't let go. Elon Musk was popular while he was mostly focused on the things he's genuinely competent at and apparently passionate about. He was not the only person to do this work, of course, but he was at least driven by something that seemed to be more than simple material control. Whether that has changed or the mask has slipped, I don't know. It's not for me to say. But the flawed nature of those two public examples does not begin to cover the deeds of those names who you don't even know in less glamorous, but equally lucrative positions. It would be easy to embrace the narrative of an evil cabal controlling the world. Where have I heard that recently? But let us not forget Hanlon's razor, that we should not ascribe malice what we can equally describe with incompetence or ignorance. Now, like many others, I do have my days now when I wonder just how far the ignorance and incompetence will go, but then I remember terrible things are often born out of trauma. And I don't feel better really, because that's not comforting when it's the future of civilization we're talking about. But at least I understand. However, if it should happen that a genuine bona fide billionaire ever watches this video, then my conclusion for you is very simple. This is not the tribal time, this is the modern mass society. And in this time, it is a new truth that you can have much more by having much less. And maybe, just maybe, that is how you come out looking like, perhaps even being, the real hero. If the paradoxical nature of that statement offends you, then I get that, but I think I've laid out some of the context as to why I state it in those terms.